Hello, my name is Ina May Whittick and welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. So who is the awakening woman? She's the woman who's seeking a greater possibility in her reality and looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her conversations will introduce you to talented women who will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. They share their stories and explain how they are in service to the world. So let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. This week my guest is Chelsea Wiley. Having previously worked as a labour and delivery nurse following the traditional protocols, her subsequent training with midwife Ina May Gaskin opened her up to a different view of the birthing experience. Chelsea is a certified nurse, Kundalini Yoga and meditation teacher, and also author of Mystical Motherhood, a step-by-step guide to bringing more awakened souls to the planet. Chelsea's viewpoint is counter to what we have taken as truth surrounding conception, birth and raising children. But as I read her book, her methods made perfect sense. Changing the future has to involve doing even the fundamental things in a different way. You'll learn so much during our conversation, including the power a mother has to choose the type of child she wants to bring into the world, why it's essential to minimise stress during pregnancies, and also her thoughts about placing our children out on social media, and so much more. So as always, I start each episode by asking the question, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel at your most her?
I feel that I'm her when I'm at my highest expansion. So when I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly challenging myself, it's like on the edge of ambition. And it's also when I'm serving others serving others and not really in my own world of, like in my own problems and my own issues. It's like when I'm completely with other women and I'm giving to them and I'm listening to them and I'm channeling for them, or I'm serving my family and I'm just kind of giving. And when I go back into another place where I'm in my own issues or my own problems, I'm not at that higher resonance. I don't feel good about my life and I don't feel good about where I am.
Perfect. And Chelsea, I just want you to tell some of your story. How did your life lead you to the point where you are doing the work now?
Well, I think life has a pretty amazing way of creating polarity. So I grew up in a family where it was pretty traumatic and hectic and non-traditional. So around the age of 8, I was almost awake enough to look at the people I was living with and realize that they were not at the same understanding of me. As like I was in my house, I remember being the age of 8 and being like, who are these people? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And at that age, I actually chose to move out. And so I hopped around from house to house until I was 18. And, because it was quite abusive and physically, emotionally on all levels. But I saw my future. Like I almost knew how to create an abundant future at the age of 8. And I remember thinking like, I have so much money, or I have this is all happening right now. And I remember creating my life. Like I'm going to travel the world and I'm going to serve so many women and I'm going to, experience this extremely high abundance, high resonance feeling. And I just saw my life as that in this chaos of a child. And then I went through a series of events. I got to go to college and I moved away and all these things happened. But I went to India for the first time around the year of 2012, 2011. And I met this person. It was like an immediate recognition. And I didn't know who he was or what it was, but it was an interesting experience. And so I went home from India for that first trip, and I had a near-death experience when I got home. And I left my body, and I remember floating out of my body, looking down upon myself in this room, and these spirits were trying to pull me out of the room, completely away from my body. It was like a complete astral travel. And I mean, that kind of shook me up. Then I've had a lot of experiences that were outwardly, but that one was my first one. And then I returned to India and I saw this same soul, this actual physical man again. And there's an attraction towards him, but some kind of a confusion. And it scared me, but I didn't really think much about it. And then when I came back from India, I couldn't stop thinking about this particular person, and I didn't know why. And I called him on the phone and I said, are you thinking about this too? And I mean, I've never actually told this story. And so it's a little frightening to put it out there, but I think people need to hear this because it's real. It can happen. So this soul I guess you would call it a twin flame or a twin soul. Mm. And I don't want anyone to like think of hearing those words and being like, what are you talking about? What does that mean? Because there's so many wrong definitions of what this kind of person is in your life. And people always think, I've met my twin soul, I've met my twin flame. Trust me, if you are at all communicating on any normal level, you have not met this person. So this person was like a catalyst. It almost like took fire to my world. And my mind couldn't stop thinking about this individual in India, which I've never seen again since. And so he is a reflection of my internal soul. So everything I thought about him, which always was kind of negative, or it was only a reflection of myself. So he, like in a relationship, if you're with a boyfriend and you're having an issue, or with your mother, it's really never about your mother or about the boyfriend. It's about your own issues that you need to work through. But with this particular person in India that I met, it just kind of magnified that to 100. So if it was like you were working out an issue with your boyfriend, you'd be like, that this is a normal fight, right? But if this magnified that issue to 100 and then put it on a soul level, it made me almost burn through my entire karmic cycle in 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so I returned from India. So this is who this person was, who helped me kind of awaken to this like new reality, because we had like a telepathic communication almost. Mm. And I would think something and he would post it on Facebook. Or it's like the Aquarian age relationship. I was living it. We did not speak, but we didn't have to, because we would speak through music, or we would speak through symbols, or we would speak through pictures. And we were speaking at the level of the soul, and he was helping to awaken me, and I don't even think he ever knew it. And it was magical to experience, but it got to the depth of hurt. I mean, every single pain, everything I ever went through, just brought it up to the surface for many lives. And at the beginning of meeting him, I was having kind of a dark night of the soul. And I went on a walk and I said, just give me something to figure out who this person is and why I can't stop thinking about this individual in India, which I'm like I had a great life, and I'm married. So I was very confused, happily married, still married. So it wasn't a relationship. It wasn't a sexual relationship. It wasn't anything. It was just this person that was, and I told my husband about him. It was just like, there's this soul that's bringing things up within me, and it was fascinating. So I went on a walk and this is after kind of figuring out who he was. And I bought a book and it was called Kundalini. I didn't know what it was. I was on the way out of a bookstore, just hoping for a prayer to figure out what was happening in my life and why I was going through this massive awakening. So I took the book home. And I sat down before work, because I worked the night shift, and I opened the book up to a random page and I started to chant. It was the first time I ever meditated in my whole life, ever. And I started to chant this one phrase, and I could never find the phrase again, ever, ever, ever. I never could figure out what page it was on, which was interesting. But I had a massive Kundalini opening while chanting this. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but I was sitting down chanting this phrase, and it was about 4 to 5 hours of this energy of the universe, like running through my body, and multiple orgasms. I was screaming, I was crying, I was almost convulsing on the floor. I went out the top of my head. I had complete bliss. I started crying. I went through all of, the layers and the chakras of my body. And the only reason I knew what happened is because I had the book in front of me called Kundalini Openings. Otherwise, I would have been like, what just happened to me? So at the same time of having a Kundalini opening, I also met my twin soul and twin flame. But, I think those two things would commonly go together if you actually meet this other individual. So it wasn't surprising now that I've read about it and I understand, because the 3 things needed for a full Kundalini opening, according to Hindu texts, is you need to have a near-death or out-of-body experience, which I had the first time. You need to have the full energy run through your body like I had. And you also need to feel love on an expansive level, like an out-of-world love, which is what he brought when I was so confused of who he was. And so I used this man for 5 years as a mirror of who I am, or so I found someone to help me through this and explain to me what was going on. She had gone through something similar. And I used him like you would use any relationship, but it was exceptionally magnified. So if you were to look at the relationship you have with your mother, everyone does. Anything that I had an issue about, my self-esteem, my mother, my father, being physically abused, being emotionally abused. He caused me to look at all of those wounds, and because he wasn't the nicest. And so, and he mirrored that to me. He mirrored the way I was always anything that the way I had always been treated as a child, he mirrored that to me by treating me the same way. Or, being my mother in that moment, or being my father in that moment, or being my best friend in that moment. And he didn't even know he was doing it because he never spoke to me. It was only through music it was magical. And beyond that, the Kundalini brought on a whole new sensations within my body. I mean, I could no longer watch TV. I could no longer eat meat. I haven't watched TV in 6-7 years. Maybe now I watch 30 minutes. It just doesn't, it's like a different, I can't explain it. It's just, I don't have an interest for it. I mean, the only thing I could think of was God. And I could have never even known who God was before that. I mean, it's like the only thing on my mind every minute of every day is before it was like, how can I clear myself enough to get to God? And now it's God. I wake up and it's prayer. It's like what a Kundalini opening does. It just makes you yearn so much for God that it's the only thing in your forefront. And that's my experience of it. So if anybody's out there and you have a random Kundalini opening, or you create one through, practice, or it happens to you, just know it's just going to connect you to your higher source. And it can be painful because it clears out all these things inside of you that are like the wrong belief systems of like your limited belief systems. And it makes you realize how powerful you are. So I did this for 6 years. As I'm doing this, as I'm going through this, internal process, like everything on my life started to fall away in a different manner. Once you start, the only way you can change your outer life is by going to your inner life. And you just, the more you can internally change yourself, the more your world on the outside will just blow up and be so abundant. And just, I went from like living at an abused home with these crazy people in so many ways to like living the life of my dreams now. And I don't say that from an ego place. I say it from a place I work to do that. And I never saw myself not living that way. It was like this extreme ambition to get there. And so it takes work. And a lot of people don't want to do that internal work. And you have to go inside to make the outside work, or you're going to keep on repeating the same subconscious patterns your whole life. So it's very important. And what the Kundalini does also, a Kundalini yoga can give you a taste of it, but what the opening did for me is I began to, it's like you go from walking in the street within a crowd to standing on a tall building of like New York City, and you begin to see the way the streets are set up, and you begin to see, oh, if you take a left there, I'm going to go right now. And then it's like you can see everything from a higher platform, and you're like, I'm in the matrix. You begin, and so for me, my vision changed. I was able to see the energetic forms of plants and animals. I began to be able to read people before I began to become almost telepathic through them, communicating with them. My whole body would vibrate on a different level. So talk about higher resonance. It's like, but it was in the beginning, it was such a big energetic shock. It felt like my organs were almost burned off. It it can, if it happens to you, it can like blow you up and almost kind of make you crazy if you're not ready, and your nervous system go nuts. I mean, it depends on the person, but it takes work to get through it. So after about 5 to 6 years, I'd done enough work. I had a lot more spiritual experiences. And before I moved to Europe, which was just recently, I had an experience where my best friend, this is another crazy experience, one of my many, but I had a friend, she was a channeler. And she said, I need you to, or we were having a session, and she goes, and Isis is a goddess. And I had started to have connections to these goddesses, and I didn't know why. I kept seeing, Mary Magdalene in my meditations, and, and I don't, we all have these grand ideas of what these people are, or who they are, but I began to become really connected to them. And she says, you're going to come to my house and we're going to do a full moon opening on you. And open your third eye. And I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I showed up and I said, okay, I'm supposed to come this Thursday on the full moon in Cancer. She goes, okay. So I show up at her house, and she's probably like one of the only like living real channelers I know. There's a lot of people that say they're channelers, but she's like a full-on source. And when I met her in her house, I realized that she's probably a living ascended master of some sort, because no one could have brought what happened in that room onto earth other than her. Mm-hmm. So I walk in the room, and it was a full moon. This is about, 6 years after my Kundalini opening. So I'd cleared myself enough, and the goddess, almost in a physical form, walked in the room, and the whole room started shaking, and the lights went on and off, and things started moving, and I was physically touched, and almost like somebody walked into my body. And I held on to my friend's hand, who was holding me physically, like, because I'm convulsing, basically. And I was taken up, which I didn't know what was. This is just another magical event, And I'm so used to all these happening that I'm kind of going with it. And I'm never surprised when I grow on a more higher level, because it's always fun to me. And it's like, I'm not surprised because I expect things like this to happen. So I'm holding her hands, and I'm taken up to like what I understand. She's talking me through what's happening, because she can kind of see and feel it. I said, we're going through dimension after dimension after dimension, and I start to see things. I start to see like angels and cherubs and goddesses and figures, and I start to hear sounds at different frequencies. And so everything changed, but I was still in my physical body, but I was able to travel I believe that time I was in the 7th dimension. Mm-hmm. And they took me through 4 to 5 hours, and I saw all these future events, which I have actually lived out now. But I was like, I'm in this temple, and I'm reading this book. And it was the Golden Temple that I went to another time in India. And basically in this moment of I was in the room, but gone for 4 to 5 hours, they opened my third eye. And they said, now you will be, completely clairaudient and clairvoyant. And they asked me to write a series of books for them. And I was like, whatever. Okay. And I left. And I didn't know what a full, having your third eye meant. What does that mean? And I started to be able to, I can see everything. And so, like, I can do readings for people now, and it's like a gift. And it's nothing egotistical. It's just like, this is the new age. This is, why couldn't this happen to somebody? This is what people dream of, So, and at first it took me a whole year to really become comfortable with it, because I was like, wait, am I telling them the truth? Am I really healing them? And so when I do readings with women around the, earth, it's so helpful. It's like I can take them with me to the 7th dimension. And when something happens up there, it's done. It's done. The healing is done. Like, I don't do anything. They work through me to tell them what needs to occur in their life. And we solve it. And once it's done in that high level, then that's the magic of like having a third eye open or being a channel in that way, is that the work is done because you take them that high. And if it's on the level of God, that's the healing. But during all that's my spiritual process, and a very short version of it, actually. But my on the other side of this, I'm kind of living in two realms. So I have this big spiritual experience, which no one really understands, and nor have I actually ever told that story in one setting to anybody publicly, actually. But on a physical setting, my job is actually just like, and my children and my life is still occurring, right? So I have quite an education. So I have an undergraduate. I'm only bringing it up because it has a lot to do with what I ended up doing in my life now, and how I'm integrating the spirit and the physical together in my current experience. So I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, and I have a degree in nursing, and I have a master's in nursing, and I'm also a family nurse practitioner. So on a practical everyday level, I can prescribe and diagnose patients in a medical setting, any medical setting I'd like. So I also have that, but I studied, have you ever heard the book by Dr. Wayne Dyer called I Can See Clearly Now? Have you ever heard that book?
I've heard of it. I haven't read that one.
So in that book, Dr. Wayne Dyer, he looks back at his life and he says, I can see clearly now at every single event that led me up to this moment in time. And he wrote it right before he died. But I remember thinking in that book, and he looks back at every event in his life, like this happened to him as a child, or then this spiritual experience happened and this dad left. And he sees it all as this massive orchestration to get to him where he needed to be for his destiny to expand so much. And it's almost like I'm seeing it now. So I did all this education, and I worked as a labor and delivery nurse. I don't know how I got the job. There was 500 applications for this job, and I got picked out of 500. I was the last one to turn it in, and that was 500 within 4 days they had. And I got picked for the interview process, and then everybody wanted the job in labor and delivery, which is it's really hard to be trained in this specific field. And I got picked. I didn't even know I was applying for it. I thought I was applying for like the baby center. I didn't think I was even capable of something that intense. And I was trained in this hospital, and I got to move on to the best medical center in the nation. So this is my job, obviously not my spirit world, but every single event kind of took me to where I needed to go next in order to do what I'm doing now. So I trained with Ina May Gaskin, one of the most famous midwives in the world, while I was working at the hospital. And I decided to have 2 of my own home births. So my passion is for birth, and my passion is for bringing conscious children onto this planet. And as I was doing all this work in medicine and in working with patients, I saw there was a huge, huge, huge problem in our Western medical system, the way we approach patients and the way that, children are birthed onto this planet. And there's nothing in any of the theories or in anything taught to any medical students or any nursing students that looks at the emotional and spiritual side of creating a child. Mm-hmm. Everything's about, is your blood pressure okay? I mean, even nutrition is skipped. And so what we don't know right now, and I think will become future, I believe that's my mission in this world, is that period of pregnancy creates the destiny and characteristics of the child. Mm-hmm. But yet we don't talk about that. I mean, we can alter the DNA of a baby within the mother within this short period between conception and birth and then the early childhood years, but we've missed that. So I understand that from my spiritual world, but I don't see that in the physical world. So I've had the opportunity to go, in my working as a labor and delivery nurse, training as a nurse practitioner, working in a hospital setting, working in a clinical setting. And then I had 2 of my own home births, and I studied with home birth midwives. I've kind of looked at birth in all of these different ways. And I've studied with the best of the best, and I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of women, and now I work with them privately. And I see, so that was all of these experiences that I'm talking about. They cultivate to where I am now, and why this book I wrote, Mystical Motherhood, is important. I put all that out there a little bit too fast, but this story, the spiritual side, and also this, drive to help women birth conscious new reality, they're combined and they're almost the same thing. And that's what I'm here to teach.
That's perfect. And thanks for sharing as well. I know you said that it's the first time that you've kind of put it all out there.
Yeah.
I think the context, it just kind of fills the context out, really, because without you talking about that real higher dimensional experience and that Kundalini opening, it probably won't make it just kind of puts more weight into the things that I've read in your book and what we're going to share, with you talking about creating like conscious children on the planet as well. And I read the book, and as someone who, in my mind, it's something that I would like to do in the future, to have children. And it just kind of got me thinking, even what I'm putting in my mouth now makes a difference, as opposed to meeting someone,
Matters.
having that conversation, and then starting to kind of take the supplements and things. At that point, I should be doing things now before I've even met that person, to prepare myself as a vessel, for the child, and how I'm going to start kind of relating to my body. And how do you start to speak? When do you start to work with women when they say that they want to have children? At what point do they approach you, or what point would you like them to approach you, if you could change that?
For me, I'm going to use myself as an example only for a second, and then I'm going to go right into people I work with. So I didn't know it, but when I was doing all this work that I was speaking about, I was actually clearing myself enough, and clearing my womb enough that I could hold I could just get pregnant easily. And I think that's a lot of the issues that women have around if you have a problem with getting pregnant, or it takes a little bit longer than you want, sometimes there's issues that you need to clear as an individual on a spiritual level. And there's also physically getting ready. But I had to do a lot of internal work. And I remember the lady I was working with said, okay, now we've worked through your second chakra. It wouldn't surprise me if you get pregnant. You're really fertile now. And I was like, why? And she's like, because you're clear. Like, a soul's going to see that and want to drop in. And I was like, and I did. And I had never been on birth control. I got pregnant within a month. And so when a woman wants to work with me, she's having it. Typically the women that come to work with me are having, it's a half and half. Some of them really want the conscious conception, but some of them are having fertility issues, and they're not really trusting this higher source. And if it's unidentifiable fertility issues, we go through everything step by step, which I can speak about right now. But you can never start too early. So you want to start, if you know you're going to have a child, you want to start like immediate. Like, you could start at the age of 15 and be safe about it. Like, if you can still be on birth control at the age of 15 or 16 and still think and know in the future you're going to have a child. So what we're doing, which is a new concept, and tribes never did this, is we're telling our wombs to turn off at the age of, like, typically, let's say we all get on birth control around the age of 16. A lot of women do. So from 15 or 16 to the age of 31 or something, or 32 or 33, we're saying to our body, do not get pregnant. And every single month we're like, please, please, please don't be pregnant. How many times have we all been like, oh my gosh, please don't be pregnant right now. Please don't be pregnant. Oh my God. Oh my God. That panic situation. So you're literally telling a mind-body split of, I can't be pregnant. And so your reproductive organs will literally energetically shut down. Makes sense. You've been asking them to. And so then when you get off birth control and you're ready to have a baby, you're like, and you haven't done any of the preparation for it. I mean, how do you expect a baby to come right then? You just told your body not to work. So the number one thing is, like, connect to in Mystical Motherhood, I explain how you can simply do that through just like sending white light energy. And that's a very basic way of doing it, but keep the connection to your womb open. Number one. Number two, physically, you need to know, physically, on the environmental toxins and the amount of bad food we eat is unbelievable. So the 74% of American women, and most likely all Western women, are actually completely deficit in nutrients. And so what happens, and the first baby can take that. The first baby will just take from you, and you'll be, the victim of the child taking all your nutrients. But you do it again, the second baby will get sick, and it starts to take again from your calcium levels. Like, a baby will actually take the fat out of your brain. And the baby will actually take the calcium out of your bones. And so tribes used to space their children out by 3 years. And we don't do that because we want to have our kids quick because we wait a long time. And so they did that in order to gain their nutrition back, but our food isn't full of enough nutrition to really even be prepared for the first pregnancy. So we first need to clean ourselves out of specific foods, which is all listed in my book. It's too in depth to really go into it. And the toxin level and the heavy metal toxins and these types of cleanses, if you can't do a heavy metal toxin, I mean, minimum 6 months before you become pregnant. Because all these heavy metals will be passed down from one generation to one generation to one generation. So if you get sick in this lifetime, you're likely getting the lead poisoning from your great grandma. It's not, and so it's not, and we're getting to a point on our earth right now that we're probably the last generation that can last. But I believe in the next couple generations, these kids are going to be sick because we are genetically passing on bad genes that are turned on through them. And if they don't have the proper environment, they'll switch on, the gene that makes them sicker. I can see the difference between my children. I had them very close together. So just to reiterate what I just said, you want to, connect to your uterus. If you're going to have a baby in 10 years, it's not too early to start now. Yogis would prepare to have their babies. Guru Nanak took 40 years. So, Jesus and all these really living saints, don't tell me that, Mother Mary didn't prepare to bring that child onto this planet. So it's like you can look at having a child as an opportunity to change the future. And if you want to do that consciously, start now. And then really look at, cleaning out your diet of all the toxins and heavy metals, but also replacing your body with the food it needs in order to almost amplify your system so that you're ready, to create this child through the right supplements, but specifically through the right foods. Mm-hmm. And then at the time, do you have any questions around that? And I can go right into the time of conception.
Sure. Actually, something that just popped into my mind as you were speaking is the question of age. As to, you're saying you prepare as young as 15 to become a mother, and it's always been in the back of my mind that one day I'll have children, and just as a young girl thinking when I'm 20 something I'll have X amount of kids, and you just don't realize that what life is, so as someone who is now 45 but still I haven't given up the hope that one day I could possibly be a parent, what can I do to prepare my body with the possibility that I may still have it? Because I'm kind of, I haven't made a decision not to have a child, but I'm not going to have a child without finding a partner that I would be happy to. If I don't, then I don't feel the loss of it. So I still want to keep the possibility open. I still want to prepare my body in the best way.
Well, I think you would so it's more like keeping the connection for that situation for you specifically. It would be about like keeping the connection to your uterus open and almost like, and start to have so there's two things you can do. So it's keeping like actually like when you're in the shower, like, are you connected to your reproductive organs, and this will help with any woman at all levels, can you, like, I use the white light. I give a white light meditation in my book. And so it's like, you just send white light to energy to it. It's like you're turning the battery back on. So that's one thing you can do. And then you can also, when you're in your meditations, or even when you're walking or you're listening to music, you can start to just ask if there's a soul that wants to come down. And to start to connect to that, that's one of the most important parts of the conscious conception, is to actually start to connect to the soul that wants to come down through you in any shape or form. I mean, it may be like, this is for every mother. It may be a soul that comes through your body. It may be a soul that you are going to, take care of in some sort of way, but you need to be able to, like, it's not too early to ever start to talk to that soul. And the woman can actually bring down a healer. If you want to, I wish I would have known these things. It's like, you can you have so much power. We talk about manifestation, but the woman, we got to give ourselves some credit. Like, if you want to bring down a scientist, ask for that. Like, because whoever comes through your life, whatever child you're going to have, is going to change the situation of your family, or like characteristics of, like, and the makeup of your family. So some children will bring money with them. Some children will bring, you know, the love of horses, something, you know, different. My child got me into Kundalini Yoga. I didn't even know what it was until I was pregnant. And so, I mean, each of these children, you know, they have their own gifts. And so you can ask for those. Like, you can say, I need money in my life or whatever. And then maybe that soul wants that too. And it's a good match. And so you want to match with that. And the higher resonance you are, the higher resonant energy you're going to bring through you. So the importance of cleaning yourself before, you know, clearing all the spiritual side and clearing the physical side creates a vessel that will bring down a strong child. And if you were saying, I want a child that's going to, you know, create a computer system that's going to change this world, why not become the vessel for that? Why not become the power for that? And that, I mean, that you don't even know, that could be the gift you give to the planet. I mean, Mother Mary was remembered for her gift. And it's powerful. And we've forgotten the gift of motherhood in that way. So that's something you can do. And another thing women should know is if you're using fertility treatments or any sort of technology to get pregnant, you still want to amplify yourself and do all that. So I talk about in my book the importance of amplifying yourself at the time of conception. So let's say you're ready to have a baby, and so now you've done all the work and you've gotten to the point where, you know, you're ready, you're in the process. Either you're doing fertility treatments or you're just, you know, having sex with your partner or whatever, however you choose to have this child. Either way, you want to amplify your body on the day of conception to a really, really high frequency. And so that would be through, I mean, I make it, some people don't meditate. So I made it really, really easy. So I said, walk, go to yoga, take a bath, do anything that you feel your very best so that your energy is running at a really, really high, you know, force. And then if you're, you know, having sex with a man, because there's so many ways to do this now, you know, make that the important time. Because a lot of people will have sex like, you know, like, let's do this 6 times and make sure I get pregnant. No. You're going to reduce his sperm quality if you do that. Do it once and do it right, and do it in a tantric way. And I list out how to do that in my book. And there's other ways to actually amplify. Just make yourself that you're the most beautiful, you know, don't make it like you're a goddess, and make it like you're bringing down a soul, and make it meditative, and then write the day down and call the soul in. And if you're going to do this through technology, do it in a prayerful manner, you know, amplify yourself, you know, make sure you pray during and after, and make the event a holy event. And then make sure you know the date of it, because in the yogic belief system, at 120 days after conception, the baby comes through, the soul comes down.
And that was leading on to the next question that I was going to ask you, actually, the 120th day. What is the significance of that? What can the mother do to make sure that she is maximizing what happens on the 120th day?
Okay. So up until the 120th day, well, first off, you don't necessarily want to tell anybody you're pregnant. I mean, it's hard. I've been there. But any thoughts, we're all one, right? And so any thoughts anybody else has, your boss may not want you to be pregnant. And so he's going to unnaturally be like, damn it, you know, or, you know, that's how the world is. And so you just up until 120th day, which is around 4 months, just try to keep it to yourself. And you're going to talk to a baby outside of your body. So you're going to keep that, like you did with conscious conception, you're going to keep that going, that conversation going, but the baby's still outside of you. Just, you know, like, and so on that day, any soul can come in. That's the day you really lock with the type of soul that's going to come through you. So you want to, and so if you're feeling bad and you're not feeling good that day, you're going to get that, you know? So it's a complicated spiritual process, and I've read all these ancient yogic texts about it. And it's like the way the sperm enters, or the way the sperm enters the ovum at the frequency will keep the base frequency of the child, you know, and then the type of soul you get supposedly with this ancient technology is on the 120th day, but it's what you're feeling that day. So you can do a party. You can make sure you could do it in silence where you're, you know, meditating as much as you can. I wouldn't go to work if you'd be like, I'm taking a sick day if you can, you know, and make it the same day as like that you conceived. Make it like powerful. And if you're not sure the day you conceived, just make yourself feel good all week long. Like if I work with clients, I'm always like, write the day down. Or if they don't know, I just said, okay, we know the general time, write that down, and then feel good all week. That's easy. Even if you don't believe it, even if you think this girl's crazy, this isn't true, that's fine. You can still feel good during that time.
That's so good. And from the 120th day as well, there's a period in the in the pregnancy where there's a wash that comes over the male child.
Yes.
And I'm trying to remember the name of it in your book, and I can't bring it to mind. How can you, because we're moving into a world where maybe that aggressive nature is not necessarily so necessary, and you're talking about kind of maintaining feminine qualities within your male child. What can you do to do that? That's where I'm leading to that.
Yes. So in my book, I provide a lot of meditations that are specific to motherhood because I want the woman to just amplify the soul. So basically after the 4th month, you've got the child you're going to have, right? Mm-hmm. But you can change the destiny and characteristics of that child. And I believe I will prove it within my lifetime that you can actually alter and increase the DNA of that child through the right food, diet. I mean, this is called behavioral epigenetics. It's a study. They're finding now in science that we can alter our DNA. So I believe in the womb, we can create like a really high being child. And so do yogis. They've always known this, but for some reason, Western medicine, I promise you, they don't know anything about it. And so if you have a female, just keep meditating and thinking good thoughts. Everything you think, say, and the environment you're in affects the child within you. So if you're in some stressful work environment, I mean, people just write it off if it's as if it's nothing. It's creating the stress levels and the cortisol levels of the being. Mm-hmm. And it's so important. So with a male, you're specific to your question. There's, and it's actually like a hormonal thing that's actually the yogic belief system and the science belief system actually match up with this. So there's a hormonal wash that goes over the male child that, it believed in the yogic system that separates the two sides of the brain, basically energetically. And so we needed that hormonal wash in ancient times with hunter and gatherers because males needed to have that need to go and that need to bring food back and almost like that disconnection between the feminine. I mean, that's the, like that hunter-gatherer feeling where the woman would take care of the children and they just don't have that connection. But now we don't need that. And so there's in the yogic, I go by ancient yogic Kundalini technology. And there's a meditation that women could do called the Adi Shakti. I love it. It's a great meditation. It's in my book. Just listen to if you don't want to do the meditation, just listen to the mantra Adi Shakti, and you can find that on YouTube. And play it and sing along, and it will just help you. For the female child, it will help to create the destiny of the child. And so she won't have to go through much to get to her destiny. Like I feel like I'm getting to my destiny, but I had to do a whole lot of work to get there, and we all have to do all this work. She won't have to do so much work. She'll just go straight on and her karmas gets burned. And for the male child, it takes away that acid wash. So he's more connected to his feminine side and has more balanced brain.
That's great. Thank you for that. And also how about maintaining health within the pregnancy as well. So as the pregnancy is going on, what can the mother do to make sure that she's maintaining her body healthily? How can she also work with how she's going to get support as when the child comes? So the conversations that she'll have with friends and family, and also the importance as well when you're talking about choosing a doula to help you through the birth, or deciding if you don't want to go that way and making the choice as to whether you're going to go for hospital birth. So it's the kind of the Western way, or choosing home. Yeah.
So in Mystical Motherhood, I broke it down using Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which takes people from the basic physiological needs through safety, through love and belonging, through self-esteem, up to a fully fulfilled life. Mm. And my theory is that you can actually create this fully fulfilled life up to age 3 of a child. Like you can actually, program a child to be this way in some way. And so in order for a child to feel safe, at birth, the mom has to prepare for those sort of things. So I talk about in the book the benefits of a doula. So a doula will help you if you want to have a natural birth, having support during childbirth. It is like exponentially important to have somebody in the room with you. Because a male, I mean, this goes back into all my training with Ina May Gaskin and so many different things I've done, but the male, he closes your uterus, you know, and if you haven't, so it closes the cervix, sorry. And so you want having a feminine around, you know, it will relax you and it will get you ready. And so and in my book, I also talk about looking at I talk about looking at midwives and looking at C-sections in a different way and looking at all the monitoring systems. So I wanted to come at it in a way that women can see all sides of it. So whatever birth you decide. So if you have a C-section, I give you a way to do that in a healing way. You know, if you have a home birth, I tell you why I chose it and why, you know, people do choose it and the safety around that. And it is very safe as long as you're very healthy and you fall into a certain category. You need to, so like just prepare, and you need to go to the hospital and you need to ask questions. You need to ask your healthcare provider questions. If you have a bad feeling about a healthcare provider, leave them immediately. I mean, every friend, every client I work with are like, I don't like my doctor. They're going to be out of town and I know I'm going to go, you know, and I'm like, nope. I'm like, move on, like, and go get and I highly recommend having a midwife. I believe that I've had so many better experiences with midwives working in this world. I've done, you know, on the physical plane, this is my work. And so I don't think males come at it at a completely different angle. And I'm so biased, but go with a female midwife and feel them and ask them questions. And I provide all the questions and ask the doula questions and see how they help you. And then during the pregnancy, walk. I mean, walking is so, so important. If you can't do anything, just walk. In Japan, they do 500 squats a day. So it's about like getting your bottom muscles, you know, ready and physically capable. I mean, labor, if you're going to do it natural, I mean, you can choose. I provide all types of pain management options in the book, but if you choose to do it naturally, you're going straight to, I mean, it is a journey. I mean, even if you're the most physically fit woman, you will sweat profusely. I mean, it's a physical, I mean, triathlon, and it'll push you. And that's why no man can do it. It's unbelievable. And so just think about all those different things and plan it out, and don't just assume in the moment you're going to be okay. If you think you want to have a natural birth, go to 12 classes. Don't, like, as a labor and delivery nurse, everyone who came in my room that would say, I'm going to do it naturally, I'd be like, okay, then I'm never leaving, because they wouldn't have been able to, because you need constant support. You need to be, it's a mental game as much as, because if it, you know, an epidural's dangled in your face, you'll take it. I mean, I remember having my home births. I was begging to go to the hospital. I was like, please, I was, you know, imagining that we were gone already. It's an intense experience. But one thing I want to talk about after you have your baby, a few things I want to talk about. I go into much deeper detail in the book, but the 40 days after you have your baby are absolutely vital. And it creates the lower shock, you know, the bottom chakras of safety and grounding within the child. And so I didn't know this as much with my first baby, but you just want to basically, I did it with my second naturally, not even knowing the yoga philosophy around it. But Ayurvedic wise, you're full of a lot of air because of the baby, you know, so there's a lot of women don't understand why they have so much anxiety after they give birth. It's because, well, you're energetically full of a lot of air because you had this big belly, and then you have all this air come up through your system. And so the air element adds a lot of stress. And so you'll find yourself being full beyond the baby, full of your own internal anxiety. And so I found myself like going on social media, because it's weird to be lying in bed with a baby the whole time, and you have so many changes and your energy system is so open. So if you use Ayurvedic foods, they can be really healing. So really, really heavy oils and carbohydrates after you give birth. It's all in my book of why it will help to nurture that air element. And then also the bonding with the baby for 40 days. Don't give your baby to a bunch of people. Don't leave your house, make it a sacred time. It's all you've got. And then do whatever you need to do but like women are always on the go, and there's so much anxiety of like, I've got to get back to work. I've got to go clean the house. I've got to do that. The most important thing you can do is set yourself up that everything is done and you just breastfeed, because that's where the postpartum depression comes from. And that's where, you know, later in life issues come from, because the first 40 days physically will add up to the next 40 years of your health. Because you just gave so much away after you have a baby. If you don't fill yourself up again and you don't like heal properly. And so let's say you already went to a state of exhaustion by creating a child. And that's why we have these children every year that are getting, you know, sicker. So you have to fill yourself up back nutritionally, energetically. It's because, I mean, you just blow yourself out. And then if you go right back into, you know, doing life as it was, you're being like going to, I see people at the gym in 2 weeks. It's like, take your time. You created life and give that life a chance.
Just thinking about when you're saying like, I remember going to the gym when I used to go through my big gym phase and seeing a woman who I think it was just after New Year's, a long time ago, but she was there like, you know, a few days later, but in the way that we all looked at her, as we all applauded her. Because it was like, isn't it amazing? She had a baby like 2 days ago, and here she is, like in an exercise class, and
that's our world.
Yeah. So
that's
it was like
world.
Yeah, treating her as a warrior, as opposed to, like you say, the woman who will take that 40 days out and nurture herself as well as the bond with her child as well. I think because you've said the importance of those 40 days and the impact that the impact that can occur if those 40 days aren't honored in the way that you mentioned. If we were more aware of that, then there would be less of this having to do and having to kind of be back on it, like the minute you've just had a child, you know, and getting back out there. There was another thing as well that I wanted to think about, because I follow, because, you know, it's the day and the age that we're in now as well. We follow social media, and there are quite a few people that I follow online that have had children in recent years or even in recent weeks that are literally back on Instagram stories like days after they've had children. Of course, some curiosity, because you're following their story online anyway. You want to know what the kid looks like, you know, want to know what they're but what does that do? I mean, there are even people that, and I'm guilty of being a voyeur of it, who are making a really good income out of using their children as their reality show. You know, there's many people that I can think of, but they're having children. They're almost pimping their kids out, basically, because their kids are creating an income and a lifestyle for their family. What does technology? What are your thoughts? What of technology, social media, on children?
So the reason I believe that these women, you know, get on social media right after having a baby, going through it myself, I have been there. It's anxiety. You're in this room and you're completely isolated and you're supposed to stay still, but your mind is still going 100 miles an hour. And so getting on social media it's an outlet for like working through all of that anxiety, right? And women, we don't know how to calm down as a culture. We don't know how to like manage our own anxiety. And so especially if we don't have meditation practice, so we don't have like an internal system. So it's going to be amplified after you have a baby. And what we don't as like you're talking about the woman who goes back to, you know, first off, she goes back and she starts to work out right after she has a child, and she's not. And that's our culture of like, that's the norm. And it's so, because we're all becoming conscious, you know, at our own, like, I mean, now that I probably would have been the same way. Like years ago, I'd been like, good job, nice. And now it's like, I see it as like, we're just all learning to become more conscious. Like, and we don't know any better, because that's a deemed successful thing. And so with the children, showing them on, we need to start to look at our children as conscious, functioning adults in small bodies. Up until the 1980s, this is all going to lead up to your full answer. We were doing full surgeries without anesthetics on babies after birth. That was just until 10 years ago or 15 years ago, something like that. We still do circumcisions like that. So what women really, really need to think about is that in tribes when they would birth their children, they would immediately keep them at the level. I mean, I'm talking about this because it's important to understand that they thought of their children as adults. So they were always kept at the level of the heart and up. So their faces were always like looking out at other tribes. Some tribes would put them on top of would connect the child on top of a piece of a wood and carry the child around on wood so that the child was at the level of, the adults, right? And then other children were held on the chest, so that they were always moving with the mother and always listening to the conversations that we're having, around, and always a part of the community, a part of the tribe. And so we don't do that anymore. We put our children in little carriages and we push them around and we separate them from us, and we don't treat them as these adults that tribes would do, as they, so that's a huge problem. So then when we put our children on social media and think that that's almost like a normal thing, it's like we're making a choice for them to say, let's make my child famous at the age of infancy, and let's show my child breastfeeding on my breasts, when that's not necessarily their conscious choice. They didn't make the choice. If could I ask my child if the picture of him or her she wants to be posted? I don't know what she'd say. I don't know if she'd be okay with it. And so it's I'm kind of taking her identity and I'm making a choice. And I want to combine that with the tribal thing, is because we are thinking that they don't have, they're not active souls, or they're completely conscious. They're, which is what we're completely missing, because we're not conscious. If we were to start to think, well, what would my child want? Or, how can I treat this child like a full grown adult, these a higher spiritual being. So when we start to do this from, the beginning of, I'm going to bring down a high child, I'm going to create a being within me that's just a force of nature. That it's just, I'm the vessel, and I'm going to birth something that's going to change this planet. So when the child comes out, you need to take all of those moments and make it still happen, and treat the child speak to the child like it's he or she is an adult. Hold the child on the level of your heart until he or she can crawl, because it does a lot of things, for creating, strong bone structure. It engages the stomach muscles of the child. It balances the nervous system of the child. And that's why tribes would carry their babies around. And so, all these things are so important postpartum, and it's vital to know them, because it creates the DNA of the child continuously.
And you talk about in the book as well of creating the sound current of love, which I think is a beautiful way of putting it. How best would you explain creating that sound current of love?
So I didn't really talk about mantras throughout all of this, but so you can amplify a child within you through your meditation practice and by playing, how we know that we play babies' music to them in the womb, right? Basically, you could just protect them from your own neuroses by just playing mantras in the background, right? And you also have to listen to the tone of your voice, which is something I've always struggled with, because I was always yelled at. And so I immediately go back into my subconscious of, raising my voice, right? And we all will do that as parents. But you have to look at the tone. It's not, the child won't listen to what you're saying. They only listen to how you say it. So you could be like, I am going to put you in a room and go to timeout. But if you say it in a, they may listen to you, if you say I'd really like to just, I'm angry with you right now. And you could either say that, sweetie, mommy's really, really angry with you right now. They're going to listen to that than you shouting that. And I have to remind myself of that all the time, because I'm with two little, hellions, right? But it's not what you say they understand. It's how you say it, because as children, I go this way deeper into this. It's they're born like we're born with an auric field, these children are born with like a sound system around them because they're still connected to source. And so every single sound and environment affects the child, right? And it creates almost like their perception of the environment. And so that's why in, you know, keeping them protected and honoring that and playing mantras in the background and not turning on violent TV. And I mean, do not play violent TV nor anything that's just, I mean, hectic, because it affects them. And we don't, I mean, how many, I grew up with like violent cowboy movies my whole life, like, you know, but that's, I mean, we can't expect the world not to have children shooting guns if we're playing that on the news all the time as a norm. So we have to change all those things, and we have to think about, you know, every environmental, you know, thing in when you're creating the child or in their environment will create who they are.
And also talking about how you talk to your children is, where did this baby goo goo gaga stuff come from, and why?
No idea.
I don't know. It's like, why is it more? Why do you emphasize just speaking to your children as adults, even though they may not fully understand the language, but just having conversations with them as opposed to kind of like dribbling all over them?
Well, I think it respects them. And I think that, I think we're going to have, I mean, I believe that there are a lot of high souls that want to come down on this planet right now, but they can't make it because the frequency of the women aren't high enough. And so like, I want to help women amplify their frequency. So let's say you do birth a really high child onto the planet, right? They're more awake than you are. You have to look at each generation as a more awake generation. Like I am triple more. My grandma doesn't understand me and my mom doesn't understand me, right? But you have to think, this child's not going to understand you. And so they're at a whole nother level. Like each generation, as you know, this is like Darwin's philosophy, but each generation is always going to be more intelligent than the last. And so you have to look at your child as that. And so talking to them like an adult and talking to them like from the day my children were born, I talked to them as an adult. And I did all of these things specifically with my second child. And I'm going to bring this up because it made a gigantic difference with my child. So I was much more conscious with her. I started meditating with her in the womb. I was chanting in the morning. I didn't know why I was chanting or what I was chanting, but it was the child who came through me that needed the Japji. And I knew why later. And I began doing, you know, avid meditations. And then I birthed her and I did it consciously for 40 days afterwards. And I held her close to my, you know, up to my chest, and I slept close to her, and I did it all. And she walked at 9 months, and so did my other child. And now I'm realizing, as I'm writing my next book, is that the reason why children right now, they're walking at like 15 months. It's not untypical. You see a child like they're still crawling because they're, you know, the mom, you know, bundles them up right when they're born. She doesn't necessarily hold them on her chest. She puts them in these carriage thing, or he puts them in a carriage and she puts them in a bouncy thing. So they're on a physical level, their muscles aren't being, you know, created on, you know, all of the reasons that tribes would do this is because it would integrate, you know, the stomach muscles of the baby or make their legs, you know, stronger. And so when we use all these like man-made things, we're changing the physical demeanor of the child. So like in tribes, babies would walk at 8 to 9 months. They would be running by 10. And that's what my children did because I followed the old tribal way of doing it. I never spoke to my children as if they were anything less than me, you know, they started walking, or they started talking very clear, quite, you know, like full sentences and way beyond some children I felt at certain ages, especially one of them. And I just feel like I made them feel like they had a voice and that they could listen, you know, or I would listen to them.
And then how do you go on to make sure the children are, I mean, how do you educate your children? Have you sent them into the education system? Do you homeschool them? Are you doing a mixture of both?
I mean, we're still at the beginning of that. But I mean, one thing that I see with all these schools is that we expect all these children to, I mean, our school system's completely backwards. We teach them algebra and we teach them math and we teach them language and we teach them all these things first. But in these higher cultures, I mean, I believe in like other realms, which I know for sure. They're not going to teach those things. Those will all come later. What they're going to want to teach is this human going to love? Do they know about unity? Do they know about sharing? And do they know the basic, premise of life? Like if I give away my toy or give away something, I'm going to get it back because I trust. And so like, these are all these subconscious neurotic tendencies that the entire world is living off of in complete fear, because at a young age, they weren't programmed to know that what is the most important thing in life? Oh, that this person is me. That I am a spirit and I came into my body, and that this isn't my, this isn't our home. This is just, I'm traveling on this planet and this is my vehicle. And so like, I try to even tell my 4-year-old that. I'm like, she asks a question, I just act as if it's completely normal. You're in a vehicle, sweetie. We didn't come from here. And so it's all a little bit different. If they act differently, I don't, like one of my child, when she was first born, she was walking up to all the children on the playground and she was tapping her third eye against theirs. And so I had to be like, you're not from here. Like, this is not what we do here. And immediately I caught it. I didn't like, my nanny caught it, or my babysitter. And she's like, why is your child tapping her third eye on everybody? And I was like, oh, it's probably some old thing from, I don't know. But teaching those basic things, unity, love, honesty, truthfulness, giving, receiving, those should be taught first. And then you learn like algebra or math, science. Because we have it backwards, I feel like. Because nothing's really working right now, so why not change it?
See what happens. What other things can you do to then make sure your child is getting to the point where they're living the life of their dreams, that they're going to be having that creative attitude and live that self-actualized life that we all aspire to do? And like you say, it's like maybe less than 10% of people ever get to that point. But if you create you spent 6 years kind of clearing in order to have that higher vibration being, then for them to be able to just go straight through instead of spending then 20 years of having to do, a Jupiter finger meditation or whatever it is it's going to take to clear.
Well, it's all about the mom and the father. And so it's like, don't worry about everything. Like if you have a problem with your child, I guarantee it's not your child, it's you. And that's the biggest problem. Like even like the most basic of like parenting people, only like one parent, I don't know her name, but like if she works with people, she'll be like, it's like a lot of people want to help the child. Like that child has ADD, or the child has an issue, or the child's not acting right. And there is times that the child needs to be like, like calm down, or like have a moment and be, definitely children need to know boundaries. They need to know no, they need to know these things, but it's usually the parents. And so I bet you if you had a child with ADD or an issue, I bet you if you worked on the neurotic person in their life that's acting super crazy and running around, that ADD would go away because they're going to respond to their environment. And
things like the ADD, ADHD, that kids get diagnosed with and then drugged to the hilt with as well. Things like dyslexia or the savants, the kind of highly creative. What are your thoughts on that? What are your insights on that?
I think that as a practitioner, people don't know what it is. So I know from the medical world, like I worked in it. They would that's why I can't do it anymore. Anybody who comes in with anything, so like any like reproductive organ problem, anything, they just want to hand a medication out. And they have to one thing they have to do, you can't walk out the door without a diagnosis, and you can't walk out the door without being given something. And the 95% of people want to be given a medication. And so though these like disorders may be something, they don't know what it is. And so they have to categorize it. I was just reading about that with ADD, is that actually there's actual scientific studies showing that like, we don't really know what ADD is. And that all these kids that were diagnosed with it's probably just the tendency of each generation to become more neurotic than the last. And then that one just really hit it hard, or went all the way. And it's just it could be, in my opinion, a reflection of the parents. We don't know that. We're never going to die. In a 20-minute appointment with a practitioner, you can't look at the mom and then her grandma and then her grandma and see what happened in their line, but it's those are the kind of things you need to realize how limited the Western medical system is, and that their only tools are giving you a medication for something. Mm-hmm. And so that's not going to solve it. I guarantee you ever, 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 that you've got to go to the spiritual level.
And when parents are making a choice as to whether they should vaccinate their children or not, do you offer advice that way as well? Because obviously there's a lot of pressure, and to some parents there's also almost penalties as well if they don't vaccinate their children.
I mean, I think it's also it's about being neutral, and I brought that up in my book. So with anything, like even I brought it up as an example of the internet. So like with the internet, teach your children neutrality as they get older. Like teach them, like, you're going to get information that this is good and this is bad, and that vaccinations are good and then vaccinations are bad, and you can have all these different things. Just know both sides of it. So it's just like how we are always this world we live in, this planet Earth, is a polarity planet. For every person that says this is good, you're going to find somebody else who says it's bad. For every person who says this causes ADD, or whatever, another person is going to say, no, this causes ADD. And so you just have to know, like, look at the bigger picture of it. So like be able to step out of all of the chaos and complete insanity of this planet, and then say, what do both sides say, And so for me, I vaccinated, but I looked in the fine print, and half of those vaccinations you don't need. So like, I didn't do anything at birth. I waited and waited and waited. And I did it and I waited all the way until I could for the ones I had to get, and if you don't need some of those vaccinations, if you get so for one of them, I think it's Hib, there's 4 that are listed, but if you read the fine print of the CDC, you only need the 4th one to be vaccinated. The first 3 are just protecting you for the first 18 months. But if you're a breastfed baby and you're living in the Western world, you're likely not going to come in contact with anything like that. So you'll still be a fully vaccinated adult, but you don't need the first 3. That's the way I did it. But I looked at the bigger picture. Just
kind of coming to the end of our conversation as well, what are you working on next in terms of how you're going to help with the future education of children, and how the parents can start to really raise this new conscious generation and civilization as it will end up being?
So I am beginning to research specifically on an area called behavioral epigenetics. So in science, in the last 10 years, it's a completely new field. They're proving that your DNA does not create your destiny. So everyone who thinks that because they have, they had high cholesterol or a heart attack or all these different things, there's only I think 4 diseases that you're really going to maybe get if your genes turn on. So there's certain things that turn on your genes or turn off your genes. And one of them is it's your diet, your thoughts, your emotions, and your environment. So you can literally turn genes on or turn genes off. And so I'm going to teach women how to do that, how to turn the DNA of the child on in the womb. And that's where I'm moving to next.
That's perfect. I can't wait for that. And just moving into the closing questions with you now, what is the best piece of advice a woman has ever given to you?
That I am the living goddess and I can do anything. I mean, in a way I didn't understand that. I didn't understand what does that mean? But it just means that I have power. I have power to create. And, whether that's creating a conscious child for a woman, or that's creating a book, or creating, in every single form, it's I can do that. And I don't have to let any limitations, I have the power to create like the gods would,
It's beautiful. And just an aside from that, how can we start to spread that message amongst women? Because that will make so many changes. And like you say, the more women that feel that they're on this goddess level will then start to welcome in higher energetic children that will just create the future that we all dream of.
Right. They have to go inside. They have to, and they have to commit. I see a lot of clients that are I'm a little bit nervous, but about as I work with clients all the time, but some of them are gung-ho and they're ready to go, and you know that something's moving in them, you know, but there has to be sort of a ready to commit, and like you have to hit a wall of like, I am done with my self-sabotage. I am done feeling like crap. I am done, you know, doing the same things my mom did and running around with my head cut off like a chicken, you know? So there has to be a wall, something has to hit them, and then they have to be like, I got to go inside. And the only way to change my outside is the inside.
And which female do you think represents higher energetic resonance to you?
I think it's any female that's doing what she's supposed to be here doing on the planet. So like for me, like many of you may not know it, but if you're going to have a baby, Ina May Gaskin, like she came to this planet and she brought back natural midwifery and home birth to, you know, to an area that had totally lost the art of it. Like she had to go, I mean, she reminds me of like what I did for this book. Like she had to go through the records and figure out, no one taught her this stuff. There was no one else. It was almost a lost art. No one was practicing midwifery in the United States. She had to go and find it, and she had to like research it and look through history to be like, let me bring this back and keep it as a record keeper. I mean, she's a record keeper of the times. And so that's the people I love, record keepers, because they keep, it's going to be lost if somebody doesn't keep that energetic energy. And she kept the energy of midwifery safe on the planet. And so I love women like that who are like, whatever it is that they're keeping here, they're doing their job to, you know, like for me, I feel like I'm going to keep bringing down, I want to teach women how to bring down a conscious child and an enlightened child. And I don't know where that'll even take me, but that's the record I want to hold for the planet. And so that's what, you know, Ina May Gaskin did. You know, there's a lot of women that do that in their own way, you know, that's cool stuff.
Perfect. And it's so exciting as well, you know, to have that as a purpose of something to do. It kind of just like fuels everything. It just makes everything richer.
Right.
And just talking about you on a daily basis, do you have a favorite self-care ritual or practice? What really works for you on a day-to-day basis in your life?
So I meditate every single morning, and I started with like 30 minutes, and now I could go for like 3 hours because I'm so open. And so I travel almost like when I'm meditating. So that's I have to, that's I don't do a lot of like spa things, or I don't think that like self-care for me is like going to the spa. It's not, it's like going inside and just like anything that's like last week I had, you know, issues with my own, I went back to me, and it wasn't about everybody, you know, it wasn't about serving anymore. And I was like, okay, well, I've got to go back inside and figure out where's this pattern? Where did I leave something off? You know, take it out. And so like, that's self-care to me.
Perfect. And you're talking about you're working on your next book. Is there anything else that's in the pipeline for you?
I'm taking on more clients, and I want to teach this program. I see it becoming like, I'd like to take this to academics one day. That's in the goal. I see it like, I'd like to change it in the system, like in that where the medical practitioners are taught, you know, just even having a class about it, or even just putting it in the classes. That's an ultimate life goal I have. I see it being taught as a system, like where, because it takes women step by step, but I also see it being like people prepare for birth, like with the Bradley method, or with, you know, hypnobirthing. I see it being like a birth preparation course. Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you. And how can we further connect with you? How can people find you online?
So I'm at mysticalmotherhood.com. Mystical Motherhood is available on Amazon, and you can find me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on YouTube. I'm constantly putting up new YouTube videos teaching.
That's perfect. So I just want to say thank you, Chelsea, for joining me today. Thank you for writing your amazing book. It's really given me so much inspiration and insight into so much that I didn't know about motherhood in general, but also the future of motherhood. So thank you for joining me on Her Conversations today.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you once again to Chelsea for joining me on her conversations. And for anyone who is thinking of entering into motherhood, I can't urge enough how fascinating and enlightening her book is. I learnt so much myself. Also, if you know anyone who is working towards becoming a parent in the near future, please direct them to this episode or direct them to Chelsea's book. They won't be disappointed and they will learn so much. And if you want to hear more from me and more about me, my name is Carol May Whittick and my website is carolmaywhittick.com. So that's CarolmaeWhittick.com. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram under Casmic, that's CAZMICK. So until next week, please stay tuned for another episode and enjoy your week. Thanks for listening again.